Morning all. Sorry for the delay for this, but I tried to upload this all in one bit at 43-minute video after 48 hours of just my phone just sitting there going starting, stopping, never uploading it. I decided, well, I'm just going to cancel it, redo it into two smaller videos and upload those. I should have better luck with that. My phone, for whatever reason, cannot upload above 40 minutes. I think I've uploaded a couple of them before, but I don't know how those uploaded, because this one here just won't. I don't know why. YouTube supposedly can upload 12 hours, but I can't do over 40 minutes. All right, chapter 29, part 1 of Fires of Prophecy, book 2 of the Morsai Saga. James sat amidst the bushes in a spot across from the gate while Jerome kept watch from his perch in the tree. As the sun dropped to the horizon, Jerome perked up a little and gazed intently into the compound. A little after twilight, he came down from the tree and back to James. And returned to James. That sounds better. Looks like they take the slaves out of the mines at night. Pointing to the diagram he had drawn earlier in the dirt, he said, "These buildings are where the slaves are housed." "You didn't see Michael, did you?" he asked hopefully. "I was too far away to make out more than vague features," he replied. "Can you determine which one of the buildings he's in with your mirror?" Removing the mirror from his shaving kit, he said, "Possibly." In the fading light, it was actually easier to see the image coming into focus than in full daylight. The image coalesced, and they found Michael eating with others. "They sure feed them well there," commented Jerome when he saw the beef and wine. Nodding, James expanded the image, and the exterior of the building came into view. Once the image had zoomed far enough away to be able to see the entire compound, he pointed to the building where Michael was and then asked Jerome, "Recognize this?" "Yeah, I know that one," he told him. "It's on the opposite side of the pit from the gate. That one and those next to it were where I saw the slaves being led." Replacing the mirror into his kit, he asked, "How do we get him out?" "We could go to where the wall is closest to him and try there," he said. "It's not much better than here, but there might be less scrutiny away from the gate." "You may be right," agreed James. He nodded for Jerome to lead the way and then followed. At the point where the wall turned back into the forest, Jerome continued on until they put sufficient distance between themselves and the men walking patrol atop the wall. Then, with a quick glance to make sure the guards weren't looking in their direction, they darted across the road. Jerome led them deeper into the forest as they followed the wall from a distance, always keeping it in sight. He continued until the wall curved away from them, then whispered to James that they were close to the building wherein they would find Michael. Coming to a stop, he glanced at James for a moment, a question on his lips. He hesitated a moment before asking, "Can you destroy the mine when we leave?" "What?" James replied in shock, taken off guard by the request. "Why?" "You saw how much iron ore they've been removing," he said. "I was thinking that if they were no longer able to get iron from here, it would seriously hurt their war machine." He turned and looked at James square in the eye. "It might be enough to force them to leave Matic, or at least hurt their attempts to take more of it." "Possibly," he said. "But what about all the slaves here? I might kill them all." "Right now, they are out and shouldn't be affected by whatever happens deeper in the mine." "I'll see what I can do." When he saw the look in Jerome's eye, he added, "I understand what you're saying and the logic behind it. If I can, I will, okay? But not until we rescue Michael." He nodded. "That will work. Now, what's the best way to get inside?" Jerome pointed to an overhanging limb that came close to the wall. "I can climb up there and swing over to the wall. The only problem is the guards on watch up there." He looked at James and said, "I need you to take them out." James gazed up at the guards and considered the plan. "I think I can arrange that without alerting everyone to our presence." "Good. Ready?" "As ready as I'll ever be," James replied. Jerome made his way to the tree and climbed up to where the limb extended near the wall. As he climbed, he kept constant watch on the guards. Whenever they glanced in his direction, he held still until they were once more turned away before he continued. This section of the wall was not as long as the one by the gate, so only had 2 guards. They stood talking to each other a couple yards from the tree where Jerome climbed. Contemplating what he would do, James watched Jerome as he reached the limb extending over the wall and gave the signal that he was ready. James concentrated and then released the magic. The two guards were suddenly pulled over the edge by an unseen force and plummeted to the ground on the outside. As they went on over the edge, one of them cried out in startlement and then was silenced when he hit the ground. Running over to them, James found that one had broken his neck and the other was unconscious. Tying and gagging the one that still lived, he looked up to see Jerome lowering a rope down for him. "Hurry up," he heard as the rope reached him. He took the rope and tried to pull himself up but failed. He lacked sufficient upper body strength. In gym class, this was one of those things that caused him to almost fail every year. He was never able to get the hang of it. When Jerome realized he was not going to be able to climb the rope, he whispered down, "Make a loop at the end for your foot and I'll pull you up." Well, that was me. When I was younger in school, I hated gym. Well, see, I had asthma. It wasn't bad. I didn't need an inhaler, but I just never got into it affected me enough to where, overly exerting myself, I lost my breath continuously. So I never really did. And in gym class, it was just a nightmare. I was the fat kid who always, when they ran around the school, I was always the one in the back. The tension on the rope suddenly tightened, and then the rope began to rise. Gripping it with both hands, he held on until he was just beneath the top of the wall. He reached out and took hold of the edge and pulled himself up the rest of the way. Jerome released the rope and helped him the last little bit. "Thanks." Jerome gave him a slight nod. "Just pretend you're a guard, so if they look up here, all is normal." "Okay." "What about those two down there?" "One's dead," James explained. "Broke his neck when he hit the ground. The other is tied and gagged." Jerome shook his head. "Should have just killed him. I can't do that." And that's true. And that's one of the checks and balances that James has. He won't use his magic immorally unless circumstances force him to. And those circumstances would have to be where he or his are in dire need, and he has to do it he has to end the life to save a life. He won't just end the life just for convenience. Not like the pit fighters of hell. But he still kills a lot of people. Kind of like John Wick, right? Because in the John Wick movies, he doesn't kill just to kill. He only kills when he has to kill or when someone's trying to kill him. Like outside, like in the first one, he goes to that one club, and the guard outside that he knows, the guy says, "Are you working?" He says, "Yep." And he says, "Maybe you should just take the night off." And the guy says, "Thank you," and walks away. He doesn't just kill to kill. He kills when he has to, but only when he has to. Stretching, Jerome pointed to a building 20 feet from the wall. "From what you showed me in the mirror, that should be where your friend is." James eyed the distance to the ground. How do we get down?" Gesturing to the right, Jerome said, "There's a ladder over there we can use. Once we do, it will be only a matter of time before someone realizes there's no one up here and investigates." "We better hurry then," James stated as he made for the ladder, with Jerome right behind. Jerome had him wait while he descended the ladder first so he could deal with any trouble should it arise. Just as Jerome reached the bottom, a guard ran around the corner of a nearby building and walked up to him as he began talking. His words abruptly cut off when he realized they weren't fellow guards, but intruders. He turned to run with a shout about to spring forth when Jerome tackled him, a quick strike with his knife, and the guard went silent, went still and quiet. A quick check to be sure no one heard the fight. They left the dead guard behind and stayed to the shadows and kept to the shadows. As they worked their way to the corner of the building. The side with the door to Michael's room was illuminated by a line of torches that shed light on the interior of the compound and the mine entrance. "Don't think we can sneak in," Jerome said once he assessed the situation. "But if we walk as if we belong, we might make it before anyone realizes what's going on." "All right," James said nervously. "Let's go." They peered around the corner to make sure the immediate area was clear before Jerome stepped out as if he owned the place. James followed right behind. Going past the first 3 doors, they stopped in front of the 4th, where Jerome grabbed the handle and pulled it open. The stench that wafted out from within caught him unprepared, and he nearly gagged. Keeping it under control, he stepped into the room and saw bodies strewn across the floor. James rushed past him and stopped next to a boy with with a man's head on his lap. "Michael," James said as he knelt next to him. Michael's head came up as if he couldn't believe what he saw. He asked, "James?" James nodded, tears coming to his eyes. "I thought you had forgotten about me." "Never," he asserted. We've come to get you out of here." "I can't leave without Nate," he said, indicating the man whose head he cradled. Closing the door, Jerome asked, "What happened here?" A look of anger overcame Michael as he said, "A fellow slave I call Blacktooth slipped poison in the wine and now everyone's dead." Tears came to his eyes as he looked around at the friends he had lost. Slaves though they were, they had been a team. His team. "Why aren't you dead?" James asked. Michael turned his red-rimmed eyes to him and said, "I was too busy eating the meat and didn't drink that much of the wine." He motioned to the man in his lap. "Nate here didn't drink much either, but he did have more than me." Jerome came over and checked Nate, finding him alive but unconscious. "I don't know if we can take him with us," he said to James. "It's going to be hard enough to do it with just the three of us." Michael got a defiant look and said, "Then leave me here with him. I'd be dead by now without him. I can't leave him. He's my friend." Jerome glanced at James, who nodded and said, "Then we take him with us." Jerome rolled his eyes and came to James and whispered, "Aren't we going to be a trifle conspicuous, carrying an unconscious body around?" "Be that as it may," James replied, "Michael's not leaving without him, so he comes with us. Besides, if he did keep him alive all this time, then I owe him." "All right," he said, "but you're going to need to carry him. I'll be too busy fighting when the guards see us leave." Nodding, James got up and said, Let me carry him, Michael." Michael removed his arms as James bent over and picked him up. As he slung him over his shoulder, Nate gave out with a slight groan, but otherwise didn't regain consciousness. Jerome helped Michael to his feet and asked, "Are you all right?" "Not really," he replied. "I did drink the wine, though just a little bit, and it's causing no end of pain in my stomach." As they made ready to leave, Michael looked around at his friends being left behind. They had the best. They had been the best. I just realized I never introduced them. Should I introduce Jerome and Michael, or do you think it doesn't really matter? Like James says, "Hey, this is Jerome, this is Michael." I mean, I suppose they're a bit rushed at the moment, so we'll assume the niceties happen later on. Jerome moved the door and cracked it open. "Ready?" When he got a nod from both of them, he said, "We'll make straight for the ladder and get over the wall. If anyone tries to stop us, they're dead." Opening the door, they stepped out and hurried back the way they came. Suddenly, a cry went up. They turned to see a one-handed slave looking in their direction as he let out with another yell. "Blacktooth!" Michael exclaimed with hatred. "He's the one who poisoned us." From the door of an adjoining building, Blacktooth continued crying the alarm as guards came running. "To the wall," Jerome urged as he began an all-out run to the edge of the building. When he got there, a man turned the corner and Jerome's knife flew into his hand and was suddenly tackled. Hang on. Okay, when he got there, a man turned the corner and Jerome's knife flew into his hand, but he was suddenly tackled from behind by Michael. "He's a friend," he yelled at Jerome as they hit the ground. "What's going on here?" Essen cried out when he saw Michael on the ground with a man wielding a knife. Eyes widened when he saw James standing with Nate slung over his shoulder. "Blacktooth poisoned the wine," Michael told him as he extricated himself from Jerome. "The whole team is dead except for Nate and me. We're leaving. Come with us." Jerome got up off the ground and gave Michael a look rife with irritation and meaning. "There's no time for talk. Let's move." He then turned the corner after giving Essen an annoyed look and headed for the wall. A crossbow bolt struck the building next to where Essen stood, and everyone turned to see the guards coming toward them. Crumph! The ground beneath the guards exploded upward. Essen gasped at the sight and then nodded as he turned to follow Michael and the others to the wall. "Get down!" James shouted to Jerome when he was already several rungs up the ladder. Coming to the wall, he placed his hand upon it and began concentrating. Jerome looked down to him, realized what he was about to do, and then jumped to land as far from the wall as he could. James released the magic, and a 15-foot section of the wall exploded outward. When the dust cleared, they had a clear exit from the compound. His knees wobbled, and Essen came to his side. "Let me carry Nate." With relief, James handed the still unconscious Nate over to the man, who slung him easily over his shoulder and then followed the others. Once they passed through the trees for a ways, James glanced behind and realized none of the guards had followed them through the opening in the wall. "Wait," he hollered, bringing everyone to a halt. "Keep a watch out, and I'll try to arrange a distraction a slight distraction for them. Sitting down, he tried to relax and calm himself as he summoned magic. He sent his senses deep through the earth to the depths where the magma flowed. Searching for fissures and cracks, he used the magic to create a path up to the lowest level of the mines. Just like bringing the water up in the desert, he created a pathway for the magma to travel, widening the way here, closing off another route there. He worked to bring the magma up to the mines. The ground began shaking violently from the pressure he was creating, causing those on their feet to lose their balance and stumble to the ground. Finally, his senses detected that the magma had broken through and was seeping into the mines. He was also able to sense a continued building of pressure as more magma pressed to push through the path he had created. Realizing an eruption may very well be imminent, he got back to his feet as the shaking finally subsided. "We've got to move now," he shouted to the others. Essen again took Nate and they raced through the forest until they came to the road. Without even pausing, they burst out of the trees and turned to the south to where their boat waited for them. As they ran, the ground began to shake once more. With visions of volcano movies in his head, James got ready to live his last moments on Earth. "What did you do?" Jerome shouted at him over the roar of the earthquake. "Let nature loose," he replied as they continued running, doing their best to remain upright as the tremors steadily increased in intensity. Suddenly, the ground stopped shaking and all became unnervingly quiet. "Get down!" James yelled. From behind them, a massive explosion ripped through the night as fire and lava burst from the ground and shot up into the sky. The shockwave rolled over them, burning them as it went. But just as soon as the burning started, it stopped. Singed and feeling like they had just been roasted over a campfire, they got back on their feet and continued to the boat. The smell of burnt hair permeated the air. Looking back, they watched lava balls shoot into the air and then land in the forest with terrible intensity. Fires began to rage. "Well, you can't do anything halfway, can you?" Jerome yelled over at him. James just gave him a look. "I don't think it's over yet. Come on, we have got to get off this island." I'm thinking a lot of this was probably influenced by the movie Volcano, starring Tommy Lee Jones. A great movie. I love it. I've seen it a dozen times. Volcano erupts in the middle of Los Angeles. This is an awesome movie in every which way. They always have that one irritating person that always gets their comeuppance at the end. I love it when bad people get their comeuppance. They continued to race down the road as more lava balls were ejected from the mine. One arced through the air toward them. "Watch out!" Michael cried. Everyone paused as they turned to watch the lava ball fly over their heads and strike the road 100 feet ahead of them. It entirely blocked the road with flame and set the neighboring trees on fire. Immediately, Jerome led them off the road in the direction of where they had left Christo and his boat. The sound of screams and shouts came from all around as people fled the hot magma spilling from the mine. Behind them, the sky was aglow from the numerous fires burning all across the island. The smell of sulfur infused the air and caused them to cough. Suddenly, 3 guards fleeing the eruption appeared in the forest ahead of them, both sides surprised at seeing the others. One of the guards hollered something, and then they drew their swords as they advanced. Jerome moved forward to meet them, both knives at the ready, as one of James's stones sailed past and took one full in the chest. As the man in front of him fell, the guard stood in shock and belatedly recognized the threat Jerome posed as he advanced. Jerome dispatched him readily and then stepped around his lifeless body as he joined with a third. The remaining guard came at him with a vengeance, screaming a battle cry. He wielded his sword in both hands as he slashed at Jerome. With agility gained from hundreds of fights in the pits, Jerome maneuvered to avoid the sword and returned with a strike to the leg, drawing blood as his knife sank an inch into the man's thigh. Crying out in pain, the man brought his sword around for another attack, which Jerome deflected with one knife while following through with the other, opening a 4-inch furrow along the man's left forearm. The wound caused the guard to falter in his next swing, leaving him open to a thrust through the breastbone. Puncturing his heart, Jerome's knife became wedged between 2 ribs and was ripped from his hands as the man fell to the ground. Bending down to retrieve his knife, Jerome had to place a foot on the man's lifeless body in order to pry the knife from where it was trapped. After wiping his knives off on the man's shirt, he quickly got his bearings and then continued to lead them through the forest toward the boat. The forest filled with smoke as more and more of the trees caught fire. The roaring of the inferno behind them continued to grow with every passing second. At last, they came to the cove where they had left Christo. Jerome came to stop, cursing. "What's wrong?" James asked as he came to stand next to him. He looked out over the inlet and understood. The boat was gone. All right, I'm gonna stop here for the first half. I'm just going to continue with the second. Second part's going to have the rest of this chapter plus the epilogue, and then we'll be done with Fire's Prophecy.